Something in the Rain is a K-drama about the romance of a woman in her 30s and a man who is roughly 10 years her junior. The show focuses largely on the two main characters themselves, with heavier leanings towards ye-jin, their relationship, and the repercussions of their being together. It is a very slow, quiet show that feels more like an extended indie film than a K-drama, but the way the themes and the subplot are approached leave little room for doubt. There's been a growing trend in K-dramas to look at sexism, portraying it and challenging it within and through the narratives of these shows. There have been some definite misfires on the front lines, but Something in the Rain is one of those rare exceptions that manages to do both and do them well. There's a tendency when showing these types of biases to make them more cartoonish and oversimplified, and there are different reasons for that. Now, as I mentioned before, this show is billed as a romance, and there certainly is a lot of romance, however the main subplot is largely removed from that storyline. It takes place at Yoon-jin's company when a higher-up decides to look into the way the female employees are being treated. The sexism in the show is not overt or in your face, but subtle gestures that at first glance may seem harmless or accidental. However, looked at for more than 1 second, especially isolated and coupled together with other similar events, it becomes much clearer what the acts actually are, which is blatant sexual harassment. Yoon-jin puts up with acts of sexual harassment largely in public, in front of colleagues where no one stands up to help her. One day, a superior takes notice and assigns a female employee to look into the matter, all the while promising the perpetrators will be forced to apologize and face repercussions for their actions. During the investigation, men and women alike express their support to Yoon-jin, but the other women who have faced similar assaults and that give her their support remain silent, too scared of what could happen to them. Eventually, the male higher-up looking into the case backtracks on his promises to help her and instead starts backing the assailants who vehemently deny they've done anything wrong, and she is transferred to a different branch to work a job she is overqualified for. Does this sound familiar?
사실 제가 번제 피해를 입었고 또 성폭력의 피해를 입었음에도
If you've been following the Me Too movement or keeping up with Korean news, you may recognize this story as quite similar to what happened to prosecutor ji-hyun, whose experience is credited as being what finally sparked the Me Too movement to take off in full force in South Korea. While attending a funeral in 2010, she was molested by a senior prosecutor. This incident occurred not only in front of many of their colleagues, but with the Minister of Justice sitting on the other side of the assailant. No one stepped up to help her. A female prosecutor tried to look into the situation, but Prosecutor So remained silent, having heard the assailant was going to apologize to her over what happened, and not wanting to draw attention to herself for fear of repercussions. She did not receive an apology, her cases were picked apart and accused of being poorly handled, and she was transferred to a different branch where the only position it would be feasible with someone of her experience to have was already taken, and taken by someone with less experience. She eventually decided to speak out again 8 years later, and received support from male and female colleagues. It's not a coincidence that the channel that broadcasted the interview with Prosecutor So was JTBC, the same broadcasting network that aired Something in the Rain. It's hard to know just how much of the show is written to mirror her real-life experiences, but it's clear the network isn't using #feminism to get more views. That it recognizes the very serious problem of sexual violence going on and is trying to help build awareness of this issue. It's also worth noting that the JTBC newsroom is currently one of the most influential news programs in South Korea, and that Son Suk-hee, the anchor who led the interview, is highly respected in his field. Anti-defamation laws in Korea are strict and powerful, which makes it that much harder for women to speak up for themselves and for people to raise awareness of sexual harassment issues. So it was necessary for these bold strokes to come from a powerful network company. And as I've said, the way this is handled in the show is exceptionally well done. It doesn't demonize all the men, or all the men besides the love interest of the main girl. Aside from the men in her family, there are decent men in the company. The only other male supervisor doesn't necessarily stand up for the other women, but he does jump in sometimes to try to do jobs or trips for them to try and be a buffer for some of the sexual harassment thrown their way.
우리 슈퍼바이저 중에서 누가 한 명 갔으면 싶은데.
제가 다음 주부터 관리 매장이 좀 줄어가지고.
줄면은 남는 시간에 다른 데 관리하면 되지.
The higher-up wanting to look into it is a male. There are also other men in the company who disagree with the sexual harassment and choose to help out. Their situation is also an interesting acknowledgement as well, as they have been fully aware of what was happening, did not agree with it, but still chose to ignore it for so long that it became normal to them.
저도 만성이 됐는지 언제부터인가 신경을 안 쓰게 되더라고요. 그래서 딱 꼬집어 기억나는 게 별로.
These men did not help the women because they did not suffer the abuse of the higher-ups, and actively benefited from the social dynamics at play. All the higher positions are filled with men, with one notable exception, while the lower-rung jobs are occupied by women. Women who never get promotions, as pointed out by Kang Se-young retaining her position for 7 years, and Yoon-jin for 10. As much as people like to think they would never stand by and let others be taken advantage of, or wronged, most people will out of self-preservation, especially if, like these men, they benefit from it. And then they'll convince themselves that it was okay to do. It also doesn't show all the women as perfect either. Nam Ho-yeon, one of the assailants and one who never acknowledged what he did was wrong or apologized, recruits Kang Se-young to get information on what the women are talking about and deter them from coming forward about anything that has happened to them and from supporting Yoon Ji-na. He accomplishes this not because Kang Se-young believes he did nothing wrong, but because he manipulates her. He talks to her in his office where he sits and she stands, reminding her that he is the one in power. He reminds her that she's been in her job for 7 years.
슈퍼 몇 년째지?
7년차입니다.
아, 벌써?
He acknowledges that it is mostly women working in the same position she is, but then comments that she stands out from them, that she is better than the other women.
강대리 정도면 뭐냐? 이제 책상에 앉아야 되지 않나? 여직원들이 유독 많은 회사라 다 고만고만한 것 같아도 그 뭐라 그래? 봉황 하나가 있는 거 아니겠어?
Then he dangles a promotion in front of her if she helps him, which she does not hesitate to agree to do.
매출 동향만 파악할 게 아니라 알잖아 왜?
상황 파악해보겠습니다.
Kang Se-young is the type who is always able to get whatever she wants. Reminding her that she has remained stagnant in her job for 7 years is a shot at her pride, but then telling her that she is better than the other women around her strokes her ego in a very precise way. It places her in opposition to the women around her and gives her the idea that she is better than them. It's not a stretch for her to latch onto this idea because of her competitiveness and the fact that she's never been particularly friendly with anyone up there, especially after the others supported Yoon Ji-na dating Seo Joon-hee, despite her blatant and consistent statements that she likes him and that she wanted him.
윤진아 애인 누군지 알지?
말 좀 하자 좀.
응? 누구야?
뭐 커피 줄까? 아니면 딴 거?
서준이
On top of all this, he baits her with a promotion and she practically jumps at the opportunity because she is so desperate after 7 years of being at the bottom. The way Nam Ho-yeon uses Kang Se-yeon to gather information and sow doubt among the women is effective, because everyone is scared that maybe they are overreacting, or maybe Yoon Ji-na is, and that it's possible it'd be best to leave everything alone, especially since they're all scared of losing their jobs because despite the harassment and being stuck at the bottom, the current economy makes it next to impossible to find another full-time job no matter how qualified you are.
언니 회사 다니시죠? 완전 부러워요. 저는 취업 안 돼서 대학원 갔거든요.
저는 알바비 몽땅 털어서 취업원서 쓰는데 다 쓰거든요.
야, 취업이 끝인 줄 알아? 나 봐. 나 4번째 회사인데 또 나오고 싶어.
왜요?
어떻게 들어간 곳마다 여직원들은 커피 심부름만 하더라고요.
On top of that, you'd be known as a whistleblower, which would deter companies from hiring you even more, and rumors of what happened could follow you there. And the situation might not be any better. It could be worse. Even if they did keep their jobs, the punishment and repercussions of speaking up can be severe. Prosecutor So has written, I've often seen how female prosecutors who spoke out about sexual harassment become accused of entrapment, as someone who tries to bring down a successful prosecutor. Another woman who was raped by her supervisor reported the incident to her company's legal department, who then gave the case to HR, who told her if she dropped the case she would get off with a warning, and if she didn't, she would be fired. As soon as she dropped the charges, the company cut her pay by 10% for 6 months as punishment for supposedly filing a false rape claim. Rumors that she was out to entrapment for money hounded her at work. Like Prosecutor So, though choosing to remain anonymous, she eventually shared her story on the internet to bring attention to the injustice. The number of workplace sexual harassment reports last year was more than 8 times the 249 cases in 2012, but only 9 suspects were indicted before her story went viral in November. And that's the problem. Sexual violence against women is a global issue. Global estimates show that about 1 in 3 women have experienced sexual violence. However, a study done by the World Economic Forum of the gender gap shows that of 144 countries observed, South Korea ranks near the bottom at 118. Korean social structure is based on Confucian ideals, which involves a strict hierarchy around age.
당신 변호사 맞아?
이게 정말 보자보자니까 어디다 대고 훈계야? 머리에 피도 한 마리 자식이 납치에 반말에 훈계까지. 대체 어디서 배운 버르장머리야? 애면 애답게 굴어.
Gender.
나 다 필요 없어.
Work experience.
장 검사님 어쩌죠? 셋은 좀 무리인데.
난 괜찮으니까 부장님 쉬어드려.
네, 그럼.
가시죠, 부장님.
그래. 아니 근데 말석이 왜 자네한테 말을 놔?
제가 학교 후배라서 그런가 봐요.
아니 학교가 뭘 중요해? 여긴 무조건 기수지. 또 말석이는 뭘 잘 모르는 것 같아.
etc. That is applicable to nearly every social situation.
그게 그 싫으면 싫다고 말하지 왜 성폭력 신화 중에 하나가 노라고 말하지라고 하는데 노라고 말할 수 없는 사전 역동들이 연령에 대해서도 저희가 이런 상하 관계 같은 이런 수직적 관계가 한국 문화에 있긴 있어요. 직장에서 상사가 회식을 가자라고 이야기를 했을 때 안 갈래요, 싫어요라고 말하는 게 우리가 보통 생각할 땐 되게 굉장히 얼서티브하게 얘기하는 것에 대해서 조금 사회적으로 보면은 그게 약간 조금 이렇게 예의가 없는 행동처럼 이렇게 보여지는 경우도 있어서 저항하지 못하고 갔는데
This is at the root of the problem in Something in the Rain, where sexual harassment is practiced openly and gotten away with because of the gender difference and difference in level of position at work. The assailants act this way because they know they can get away with it because the women who are also below them at work must treat them with deference and go along with the harassment. But things have been changing, says a male activist in Korea. Submissive gender roles for women have changed, making some men anxious. The result is a growing pattern of violence directed against women. An assumption that definitely has merit. According to the World Health Organization, men are more likely to perpetrate violence if they have low education, a history of child maltreatment, exposure to domestic violence against their mothers, harmful use of alcohol, unequal gender norms including attitudes attempting of violence, and a sense of entitlement over women. These changes are so prevalent and have come so quickly that you can clearly see the change in the way women are represented and treated in K-dramas.
아까 당신 보고 살짝 설렜어요. 그쪽 같은 스타일 사고 이전에 목록에도 없었었는데.
차 좀 세워줄래요?
얘기했잖아요. 도착할 때까지 휴게소도 안 쓸 거라고.
내일 예약 몇 시가 좋아요?
그러지 말고 우리 지금 볼래요? 싫어요?
안 싫어요. 오세요.
Even K-dramas that revolve around romance, like Something in the Rain. This is saying a lot considering romances are generally meant to entertain, to be escapist fiction, not to challenge the consumer in any way. This is why so many romances can also be regressive, because they are indulgent, a way for us to enjoy our wildest fantasies, even if they are problematic. It's also why you will most never see any shows challenging the ideas of relationships in any real way, an absence set in stark relief since the show Because This Is Our First Life aired. It's the first K-drama I have ever come across that has picked apart what a romantic relationship really is, why we have them, why we stick with them, and how they can change and evolve to fit different people in different times. It's an absolutely amazing drama because of how much it covers, and how well it gets across its themes and ideas. The romance plot in Something in the Rain almost feels like it's trying to do the same thing, but more because of the sexual assault subplot, unfortunately. Almost everything happening outside of the company is basically your typical K-drama, but the roles are reversed. And Yoon-jin and her family aren't CEOs at big corporations, but middle-class citizens, while So Jun-hee and his sister have lost a mother and have a dad who basically abandoned them and had rough lives, though neither of them are poor by any means. The biggest gender swap, though, is Yoon-jin-ah's family as a whole. The head of the family is the mother, not the father, which is made most apparent in this scene, where Yoon-jin-ah's father tries to have a speech and be the leader, but who has absolutely no power, so he only succeeds in annoying the mother, who walks away without dignifying his speech with a verbal response, and also the kids because he went against the mother. After the scene, he is cowed into supporting the mother, quietly going to Yoon-jin-ah to try and make peace, generally a role reserved for a mother who is trying to placate a father and eldest son. And while that idea is great and works fine on its own, it just doesn't mesh well with the office subplot. Sexual harassment is usually an issue that falls under the larger umbrella topic of sexism, since most of the sexual violence that occurs is done by men to women. However, that doesn't mean they're going to just magically work together. Tackling sexism by gender-swapping typical roles and portraying it as realistic and normal does not inherently complement or even just relate to depicting the atrocities of sexual assault in the office environment. The only story element that really ties the two together thematically is the subplot of Yoon-jin-ah's obsessive ex-boyfriend, who views women as props and, as Yoon-jin-ah so wonderfully puts it,
네가 하는 거 이거 지금 사랑 아니야. 미련도 아니고. 이제껏 원하는 거 다 쥐고 살다가 난생 처음 느끼는 감정이라 착각하는 거야. 네 고집이고 오기야.
어기면 어떻고 뭐면 어때? 널 다시 갖겠다는 거 마찬가지인데.
그 사고방식부터가 틀렸어. 난 네가 갖는 물건이 아니야.
But this subplot ends around when the office subplot really takes off. And I feel how separate these two plots truly are from each other is really seen in how the show finishes off overall, which truly baffled me when I saw it. After 15 episodes of build-up, after discovering all this abuse, seeing all this spying and evidence, witnessing the men panicking and desperately trying to find out how to save themselves, getting ready for the fight against them, this subplot is resolved off-screen, during a time skip. We only know what happened thanks to a short scene with a few lines that gives us vague answers and is extremely unfulfilling.
남이사도 똑같아. 판결 난 지가 언젠데 아직도 자기는 억울하대. 승자답게 웃어넘겨.
This may have been done purposefully, not wanting to give a satisfying ending so viewers can properly move on from the injustice because it is an ongoing fight in the real world. But that's more hopeful speculation than anything since nothing in the show substantiates it. And I will say, I don't believe the creators of the show are terribly gifted with endings, because while the show basically shunts the sexual assault subplot to spend the entirety of the last episode focusing on the romance, that ending was pretty poorly handled as well. The characters have been separated and need to come back together again in the end, and that will take time, but the creators threw in new and unnecessary obstacles to draw it out so that it would take the entire episode for them to finally get back together. And we only get to see them together again and happy for a few seconds before the show ends. It was just so unsatisfying, especially after all the emotional turmoil the show puts the audience through. Now, none of this is meant to take away from all the good the show has done. I have never seen another K-drama like it before, so explicitly willing to deal with sexual assault and presenting sexism and complicit sexism in their full ugly truth. The nuance in the script and the acting were all incredible, and the directing was unique and usually enhanced the story. Though the use of long takes was a bit excessive, I'm happy that there was some experimentation done in shooting the show, rather than being done in the conventional or overly glamorized way that nearly every other K-drama is done. And the music is also different from most K-dramas, not only using pre-existing songs, but choosing sounds and styles that are very separate from any other K-drama, and fit perfectly with the tone and feel of the show. It did run into the same problem where it just kept using the same 2 or 3 songs. If I never hear Stand By Your Man again, I'll be fine. But this change is still extremely nice. It is also worth noting that its flaws never accidentally undermine or contradict any of the major messages, something that can be difficult to avoid, especially when addressing social norms that are deeply entrenched in people's minds. Every risk this show took, every change it made to conventional K-dramas, was a step in the right direction, and so incredibly worth making both from a political and artistic viewpoint. I'm not trying to deny that. What I am trying to bring awareness to is that these subjects can be done, and can be done well, that there is still room for more shows addressing and discussing these issues, that there is still room for improvement, that the fear of messing up or facing backlash shouldn't stop broadcasting networks from adding more shows to the currently extremely short list. This show is still amazing and important and worth watching, and will undoubtedly do a lot of good, not just for Korea, but for everyone.
This is one thing I know. I feel everything. I've never been so exposed. Are there pieces still yet to be discovered with your love? I can see anything through wherever you are. I can